Turkey is going through a difficult period. On Monday, February 6th, we experienced a 7.7 magnitude earthquake. Approximately 9 hours later, there was a 7.6 magnitude earthquake. Since then, we recorded more than 15,000 aftershocks. The earthquakes claimed almost 48,000 lives. Hundreds of thousands of survivors suffered physical and psychological injuries. The earthquakes took place in Kahramanmaraş, but I must say that all of Turkey was shaken. No citizen fully recovered from what we call the disaster of the century anywhere in our country. Despite experiencing earthquakes often and having experienced major earthquakes in its recent past, Turkey found it difficult to grasp what happened. This disaster affected 11 provinces. Kahramanmaraş, Gaziantep, Şanlıurfa, Diyarbakır, Adana, Adıyaman, Osmaniye, Hatay, Kilis, Malatya and Elazığ. But even people with no ties to the region were deeply wounded. Despite the weight of this burden and the difficulty of this test, the Turkish state and people got back on their feet together. Public institutions, non-governmental organizations, private sector, sports clubs, and the media passed this test with flying colors. At the same time, our friends abroad, including many European countries, many European governments, answered Turkey's call. They made cash and in-kind donations, as well as deployed their search and rescue teams to save many lives. Our government activated Turkey's disaster response plan, TAMP, immediately after the earthquake. Under the coordination of AFAD, the Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, we launched rescue efforts and began to address basic needs like food and shelter. Our President, Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, monitored and directed those efforts since the first moment. In truth, Turkey has taken many steps to prepare for earthquakes and other disasters in the last 20 years. Our President said that 98% of all collapsed building has been built before 1999. Essentially, that information shows that Turkey took the right steps after the Marmara earthquake, took most of necessary precautions, and made progress toward disaster-resilient cities. It is clear that strong and stable political will is necessary to rebuild cities after the disaster of the century and to resume ongoing urban renewal projects with an eco-friendly approach to urbanization. Following the disaster of the century, the Turkish state supported its citizens through all of its institutions. Tens of thousands of public officials, including soldiers, policemen, medical workers and rescue workers, reached the disaster zone and began to work under the AFAD's coordination. As a matter of fact, we saw public officials stationed in the area help the general public without thinking about the safety of their families first. The entire state's apparatus mobilized after the earthquake, and in this regard, our indigenous drones also scanned the area from the sky and identify collapsed or damaged buildings quickly. All the collected data was instantly delivered to the crisis desk in Ankara, and our rescuers and resources were used most efficiently. Of course, healing the wounds is a long-term task, is a long-term process. By now, more than 3.7 million people have been evacuated. We are taking steps to support them financially and emotionally so that they can rebuild their lives and send their children to school. After the earthquakes, we inspected 1.7 million buildings and 5.1 million independent units. Damage assessments in 5 provinces has been completed. We offer temporary housing to some 2 million citizens. For this purpose, we made available tents, container houses, student dorms, ships, and guest houses. People with no personal ties to the region.
So all these people are living in small tents, and
I don't just refer to manpower. The entire state's apparatus mobilized after the earthquake. The Directorate of Communications has been active on the ground and at the crisis desk in Ankara since the earthquake. We took steps to help the national and international press to work freely. At the same time, we fought disinformation and fake news. In this regard, we accredited 1,400 international media representatives to ensure that they can operate safely and comfortably. This is on top of Turkish journalists and some 400 foreign reporters living in Turkey. Likewise, the Presidency's Communication Center, CİMER, worked very hard to process some 1.5 million submissions from private citizens. The Center for Combating Disinformation, which is a part of the Directorate, published bulletins to combat disinformation on social media platforms, and they responded directly to fake news. That was very much important. As you know, many states came to see disinformation as a major threat in recent years. Turkey, like others, has taken some precautions. Most recently, the Turkish Parliament passed a law to combat disinformation. We have been trying to stop systematic dissemination of fake news and systematic disinformation on social media. At the time, of course, some people criticized Turkey by hiding behind freedom of expression, particularly our European friends. So criticized Turkey over a vital issue like the fight against disinformation, but took very similar precautions themselves. Naturally, that raised some questions. After the earthquakes, however, it became clear that disinformation threatens people's lives and property, not just state security, not just national security. Specifically, some people and groups spread baseless rumors on social media. I have to talk about it. For example, thousands of people shared messages from social media users who said that they were under the rubble. When rescue workers went there, guess what? They saw standing buildings. In this sense, we have seen how some people tried to prevent the efficient use of resources. I must add that international social media companies, starting with Twitter, has some shortcomings in the beginning. But first of all, we didn't receive enough support from them. But after some meetings, the company began to pay attention to this information. Right now, we are working very closely with them. As the Turkish state worked for survivors on the ground, hundreds of associations and foundations which represent different social groups performed different tasks on the ground. To be clear, this sense of unity, fraternity, and solidarity, which resurfaced after the disaster, makes the Turkish people special and invincible. The disaster of the century in Turkey sent shockwaves normally through the world. As you know, our government declared a level 4 alarm after making initial assessments in line with the TAM. In this sense, we requested international assistance. Tens of countries, including Azerbaijan, Australia, Japan, Greece, United States, Ukraine, Israel, Germany, South Korea, Qatar, Spain, and others answered Turkey's call. At the same time, we received significant support from EU civil protection mechanism and our NATO allies. Of course, we are grateful to all countries and peoples that stood with the Turkish people at this difficult time. Many countries sent rescue workers in Turkey, and they made cash and in-kind donations. There is a beautiful Turkish proverb: a true friend make himself or herself known in difficult times. At the same time, we believe that the nation state's reflexes must take a back seat in the face of shared suffering and risks and threats. We must keep in mind that pandemics, wars, and disasters have global impacts. We must develop a new model of international cooperation to stop them and heal the wounds. In this context, we attach great importance to the upcoming donor conference by European Commission. This event shall highlight the European states' support to Turkey and raise funds for long-term projects for earthquake survivors. States may disagree from time to time, but we are happy to see how many friends we had and that we could find a common ground as human beings. It is possible to say that whole world supported us partly because Turkey has helped others for years in the face of humanitarian crisis and natural disasters. As you know, we proudly say that our country has been a world leader in humanitarian aid based on gross national product. We have seen wealthier states offer their support in various ways. Nations with more limited resources offered their condolences. They prayed for our lost citizens and survivors. We appreciate and thank for all those efforts. We pray that similar disasters do not occur anywhere in the world. Distinguished participants, as you know, our President visited the region many times and met survivors. He heard their problems and instructed the authorities to address shortcomings if necessary. Unlike some people who tried to take advantage of the disaster of the century, he stressed that he was only interested in healing the wounds in line with the maxim, let people live that state may survive. In this regard, we are working hard to rebuild and improve all 11 provinces. Our state didn't abandon its citizens in one, Elazığ, or Izmir in the past. We will also stand with our brothers and sisters that were hurt by disaster of the century, and in this sense, we heal the wounds and reverse the damage to the region's economic life, demographics, culture, historical heritage, and environment. As our president said, building safe and permanent housing units for survivors and delivering them within 1 year among our priorities. At the same time, Turkey focuses on preparing for future disaster anywhere, including in Istanbul. Our president recently chaired the first meeting of the National Risk Shield. He announced his decision to form the Disaster Management Policy Board at the presidency. As our president said, we are determined to make Turkey the best prepared and most rapidly responding country in the world with common reason, common conscience, common morals, and a common vision.